This is a Sportsy media production, part of Quiet Loud Studios, the podcast network where reflection meets amplification.
Alrighty, everybody. Thank you once again for joining me on another episode of the Raw, Authentic, and Vulnerable podcast. Very, very excited for today's guest. But before we get there, I just want to, as always, thank you to everybody at Sportsypreneur for allowing me to come on here, share my story, have guests to come on and share their story, to normalize the conversation around the fact that we all struggle. It's not just 1 in 5. In my opinion, it is 5 in 5. We all have, and we all will. I hope we're all in a place of peace in our struggle currently. I know here in Cleveland, we've got a beautiful sun shining today, and that is very rare during these months. But nonetheless, thank you again to everybody at Sportsypreneur. With that being said, I will now hand it over to my guest for him to introduce himself, and then we are off from there. So go ahead, brother.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate you having me, and I love the topics you cover and the way you go about it. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you. My name is Derek Bylsma. To try to explain what that means, I think is a complicated answer. But at the end of the day, I've been in recovery for 20 years. I've done a lot of my own personal work throughout, had a lot of different ups and downs in life. I was a college and professional soccer player. I've owned, I think, 5 or 6 businesses throughout my career. Was in recruiting for a lot of years. And then after I kind of went through a lot of my own work, I decided as a middle-aged guy in my mid to late 30s, decided to go back and be the oldest guy in grad school. And my wife convinced me that I should be working in helping with people to try to help folks, I guess, see part of the path that I was able to see and kind of just moving forward in life and constantly changing and evolving and progressing. And so I've been a mental health counselor for the last 15 years. I am one of 2 owners at a group practice in Chicago by the name of Millennium Counseling Center. We've been around for 20 years. We've got about 20 different people. We do anything really to do with mental health, but we specialize in things around substance abuse and other kind of compulsive behaviors, as well as trauma. We do a lot of trauma work. And then we've got a division that works specifically with athletes. And so we have former athletes who are now therapists and sports psychologists who work with college, pro, club, those type of athletes, which was another sector that it was, hasn't always been has as much access to kind of mental health support and those types of things. So like I said, we do a number of different things, but my passion is in really, as I said, using my own experiences and the things I've learned from a bunch of amazing people along the way and trying to help people kind of maximize whatever they can out of their lives. And I think it ends up most of it comes from inside of our head, and the more we can sort through that and understand that and use that to our advantage as opposed to our disadvantage, then I think we can all keep working towards what we're doing, constantly moving forward and evolving and trying to be the best version of ourselves.
Amen to that, brother. I like what you said there at the end, that you're either using your mind to your advantage or to your disadvantage. It's actually something that I've been posting a little bit more recently about is, external situations are going to happen. And the moment they happen, it's got nothing to do with it anymore. It has everything to do with where you go mentally. So let's make sure that the stories being created, the conversation being had in your mind is, again, working to your advantage and not to your disadvantage. First, well, thank you so much for sharing all that you had. And, I want to jump into what you're currently doing. But before we get there, I'd love to go back. And you had mentioned that you're now 20 years in recovery or 20 years sober.
Correct.
Is that just from alcohol then? Or what? I know for myself, it was alcohol, it was marijuana, it was chewing tobacco, it was X, Y, and Z. So for you, was it just alcohol or did you explore other things as well?
No, I mean, my main issue was around alcohol, but I certainly wasn't just, it wasn't only that. And so, yeah, when when I kind of made that decision a long time ago, it was really anything that's mind altering. And so drugs and alcohol and those types of things that I've been, completely away from for just over 20 years. I had my 20-year kind of anniversary in May, and it was a life-changing decision for me. I think that we all have to look and see whether I know plenty of people that don't need to make that decision, and they can, kind of go about their life doing things in a way that works for them. But for me, it was something that I realized that was the main thing getting in the way of the things I wanted to do on my time here. So yeah, I've been a fortunate one that when I decided to make that decision, that's held true for the entire time, and I've never gone backwards from that. And so like I said, I have many important things in my life, but that's the most important. And it comes with a lot more than just the substances, right? That's the kind of the impetus for it. One of the things I like to talk about with people is kind of the difference between abstinence and recovery. And those are two different things, right? In my book, that we can subtract the substances, right? But then that opens the pathway to do the rest of the things. And that's where, by being abstinent, you can oftentimes get rid of the consequences of whatever that we're coming with that. But to really get the benefit of it, that's when we need to kind of move into recovery, where we're, kind of being the best version of ourselves and trying to live a way that we all want to. I believe all human beings want to be good people and want to live in a way that we feel good about, and that we can put our head down at night and feel good about the way we treated people and the way we navigated throughout our day. And so to me, that's kind of the broader version of what recovery really means to me.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. And in the beginning stages, when you reflect on, again, the beginning stages of your recovery, were you then going to AA meetings, or what did that look like for you?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I used any resource I could at that time. It was, so I was involved in 12-step and have been a part of the 12-step community in Chicago for a long time. And then additionally, I had a therapist. I had somebody who I worked with personally. I grew up with a mom who was a therapist and had a therapy practice, and a dad who was a sociology professor, and a sister who's a pediatric oncology nurse. So I was kind of around that whole idea of, kind of trying to make sure that we're finding resources to help us in all the things that we're doing. And so, I tried to use every resource that was out there, and some are, some are more effective than others. But there's a lot of different ways to go about this. And I think we have to be open to seeing what works best for each of us.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason why I asked that, Derek, is because to be in a place of support for somebody very close to me. And again, I shared that, I was an alcoholic. I certainly abused alcohol for many years throughout my life. And I've been able to heal the wounds that were attached to the need for the alcohol. And so it was literally just about a year ago that I was going to support this person, and I showed up with them to an AA meeting. And I will never forget what every single person or participant that was there, I think it was mandatory that they had to say their name and then I am an alcoholic. And through the work that I've done on myself, and now understanding the power of our thoughts and the power of words spoken, was it like that for you? Because when I reflect on that, and there was many people in there that were, at the same stages as you are currently, 20 years since their last drink, and they're still saying I am an alcoholic. So again, I feel like, or my perception at those times was, I feel like these people are trapping themselves and they're still identifying with something that they're clearly not anymore. So I don't know if this was a level of like acceptance, right? Maybe like the first step that you have to take in the 12-step program. I don't know. Again, I was never in that. So I would like to hear your opinion on that and what you think about the fact that, these people were required to say that. And was that the same case for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the community you're in as far as how, kind of how people look at those things and how important that piece of it is. But I think that the bigger picture of this, right, is to just be able to acknowledge that there is something that we need to, like you said, accept that this is an area of my life that I need to, I need to accept that there's some changes that need to be made. And I think that for some people, like I said, I don't think there's the same pathway for everybody. And I think that for some people that works better, and for other people, it kind of what you talked about works better. I don't really think there's a right or a wrong way. That I don't believe in a lot of absolutes, that there's always this way and that way. I think that there's certainly, some things we can look at that give ourselves a better opportunity to get to where we want to be. And there's a lot of different options for that. But I think that if you look at kind of the concepts around whether it's therapy or treatment centers or 12-step or any of the other support groups you have, if you kind of boil it all down, the concepts are all pretty consistent. It's kind of more the intent and the, kind of conceptually what we all need to do to kind of get to that point is the same. It's just the process can look a little bit different and how we go about that. And I think that so there's a lot of nuances to it and a lot of different, kind of little pieces to it. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think it's really important that we all kind of understand the general things that we need to around that, and then we can find the processes that work best for each of us. You have to be open-minded, and you have to be willing to do some things. It's a lot of work. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and also the most impactful and positive thing I've ever done. And I see a high correlation between that. Most of the things that turned out to be very valuable in my life took a lot of work, and that's okay, right? It's okay that things take work, and we just have to be willing to do it. And acceptance is a big piece, right? And that's a part of it, right? A lot of us don't like to look at the things that don't feel good or that we don't like about certain aspects of our life, and we just kind of have to be willing to look at that and be open-minded to, all right, well, how do I go about this? And typically we can find someone or some group or some community that has a way that will work for you, as long as it's about your priority, right? If you make that a priority and you want to find your pathway, then I think it's out there. It's just a matter of, but it's complicated, and it's not an easy thing to figure out kind of what works for you and what doesn't. And there's some trial and error and, all of that. But I think it starts by kind of the mindset that you go in it with, and really wanting to, which I think we need to do constantly is change, right? Like people say to me sometimes, like, people are people, they can't change. And that's a thing that people have said throughout the years. And I always say, well, I sure hope not. Because otherwise then my own life and what I spend all day, every day doing really is a colossal waste of time then. So I don't believe that to be true. I think people can change, and I think we do change for the good, for the bad, all those things. And we just want to give ourselves the best shot at being, having the life we want to live.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very powerful share there. And, I like what you said in regards to there's essentially what you said is there's no, clear cut one path for everyone. It's not a one size fits all. And I certainly am in agreement with that whatever the person is, using the external source, like their pain that is within, it's going to look different. It's going to feel different. It's going to be messy. It's going to be dark. It's going to come with light. It's going to come with darkness, and then everything in between. Sort of, for us as a society to think that, okay, this is the one way and the only way. Well, sure, that's going to work for a lot of people, but for many people, it's not. And then it's about willing to go and try it, at least to know if it's for you. And then to recognize, okay, this isn't, but that just because it isn't doesn't mean I just shut down and I don't try anymore. No, we go and explore other things, and I know for me that, it's like I climbed a mountaintop, so to speak, in regards to my healing. And I thought I made it to the mountaintop. Well, I'm good to go. Like, I don't need to work anymore. And then I looked down into the valley and I realized that there was such depths that I needed to get to. In the path down, well, I could look down and I could see that there were several different paths, and so it's just the same for everybody, and it's about understanding that regardless of what your path is, it's best to not compare your path to anybody else, right? Uh-huh. And certainly don't compare your year 1 of recovery to somebody else's year 15, right?
That's
because
right.
You're just setting yourself up for failure there, But I wanted to get your take on another thing that kind of just naturally came up. It was my sister and I were talking about, the word addiction. And we were trying to take a different perspective on it. Is it addiction or is it reliance? Or you're reliant on this thing but the true addiction is from you running away from the inner wound or, inner child that needed safety and comfort and love. So when I reflect on myself, every time I would go in need, to get drunk or to smoke, within me was just a little child, little inner Jake that just, wasn't feeling seen, wasn't feeling heard, and just needed some comfort. So if I would have, could have gone in and tended to that, well, then maybe I don't go to, being as reliant on the alcohol or on the marijuana. So again, I know that you've done a lot of powerful work on yourself, and I know you're now guiding and helping other people. So do you see it like that? And if not, do you see it as an actual addiction opposed to a reliance on something that's external?
I think it's both and either. I think that when we're trying to understand things that are complicated that we don't understand, and this is a good one, right? You have something that's severely negatively affecting your life. You're doing all these things in your life to try to make life the best you can. And then there's something that kind of consistently is creating hurdles. And then you're going back to that, right? That's a very confusing thing, especially when you get down the line of that and it's starting to cause a lot of problems in your life. All right. And so I don't think people generally understand that. And so we try to come up with ways to define that, whether they're words or theories. And, there's a big portion of people who would say that, yeah, it's all about trauma. It's all about, escape. There's other people who look at it from a medical standpoint, that it's a physical dependence on something, right? Which we know there's at least an aspect of that for some people. If you talk about, you look at particularly like alcohol and opiates and benzos and things like that, all of those have a medical detox component to them, where when these things are leaving your body, then there's, that there's a medical aspect to it. So I think that the kind of the way I think about a lot of things, I think it's that I think that you can, you kind of talk about your experience, and that's going to resonate with a bunch of people. And there's going to be some people that it's not going to resonate with, right? And so I think that that's what we need to do as a community is we need to find the things and the options that resonate with each person, right? We need to be open-minded enough to say, okay, like this is what my pathway was, or this is how I see how I got to that point and how I got out of it, or whatever that is. And, it's interesting because it's not like exclusive to substances, right? You can, there's gambling and there's sex and porn and love. And, there's lots of different ways that essentially what we do is we become, to your point, over reliant on something as a solution, right? As a solution for one thing. And I think what happens to people is, for the most part, when people start, and we'll talk about substances in particular, but when people start with substances, they're trying to solve something, and it's not necessarily, in the beginning, it's not necessarily about being sad or down or hurt. It's that I'm going out on a Friday night and I think this will be a 7 out of 10. And if I have some drinks, it'll be a 9 out of 10, right? And you go and you experience that, and that's true, right? So you go and you do that. And so I don't think we start with this idea that we're kind of escaping or covering up or any of those things. I think that, and then it works. I think the problem becomes with anything in our life is that when we think that any piece of this, that's the solution to everything, right? Because then what happens is you have a tough day at work and you say, oh, okay, well, I want to feel a little better, so I have a few drinks then. And then that works, right? And then that kind of, for some people, that just works, right? They have a couple glasses of wine a week. It brings down, makes them mellow out a little bit, and it's not an issue, right? It's actually probably a positive in their life and not a negative. And then there's other folks who start seeing it as a solution to many, many things, and that's where I think we kind of get in trouble with anything, right? With anything that I think there's just such a broad range of ways that we kind of solve things and cope with things, and things that are helpful, right? My back hurts, so I take some ibuprofen. There's all these different things, and I think it's just a kind of a constant search to find healthy ways to solve those problems, and then the ability to notice when they're no longer healthy ways, and that they are now kind of becoming unhealthy for us. And that's a really difficult thing to do, because you combine all these words that you hear thrown around ego and pride and, all those types of things. And they affect our ability to see things clearly and not wanting to be wrong or wanting to seem confident or wanting all these different things. Right. And so I think you start putting all those into the equation yeah, I guess my answer to that is that I think that's true. What you said is true. Yes. And then I think there's other instances and, kind of understanding how you got to a place is important, but it's important then what you do with that. Right. And I think some people spend most of their effort trying to figure out how they got there. And then they don't get to the next step, which is now what? And at the same time, I don't think you can just say, all right, well, I got to this point, the past doesn't matter. We need to understand that so we don't continue those same decisions or mistakes or that we made and learning from that. So I think they're both important. I think the past is important. What we're doing moving forward is important. But ultimately, I think the most important thing is the present. And because that becomes both the past and the future, right? And so if we're not taking care of that, then there's going to be trouble in one of them.
Yes, absolutely. Once you get to tomorrow or once you get to the future, where are you? You're here and now.
Yeah, right.
So
that's right.
Yeah, I love that perspective on it. And when another thing, because you had started then, leading or talking about healthier forms, right? And there's something I've been talking a lot about lately is even working out and exercise. And yes, we know it's very beneficial for you, right? There's stuff coming out about like literally just flexing a muscle, what type of release of chemicals that does in your body, right? And then eventually those chemicals make it up to your brain. But I feel as though even exercise is in a sense can be unhealthy, an unhealthy form of suppression. Whereas, people, they start feeling a certain way. Oh, I got to go work out. I got to go exercise. So my challenge to people like that is, well, try no exercise for an entire week and tell me what comes to the surface. And then how are you? And then what do you do with how you are in those moments, So one thing that, again, as you were sharing there, when it comes to, alcohol and in the work that you're currently doing, are you seeing more men that are resorting to alcohol or more women, or is it a little bit of, is it even, or is it, lopsided on one side?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I think historically, we have seen it as more of a male problem, but I don't know that was actually the case. I think it was maybe in a lot of ways, the kind of societal norms and things like that. I think that's viewed a little bit differently and is ever changing. So my guess is, I don't know, just what I know about just the world, and my guess is that if you really looked at it and it's a hard thing to recognize, right? Because there's a whole group of people out there that they don't get treatment, they don't acknowledge it. It just becomes something that is true, right? And that. So I kind of look at it a little differently, like and specifically to what you're talking about, substances, is I think people try to put in a category that like you're either, to go back to what you said before, like you're either an alcoholic or you're not, right? But I don't feel like there's this little line that, you're 9/10 of the way there. And then as soon as you hit the 10th, right? I look at it more of a spectrum. And I look at a lot of things on a spectrum of how we are. And so I think that somebody like me, when it came to substances, was a 10 out of 10. Some of my friends and my wife and people like that, I would say, are a 2, right? And so it's really just seeing, kind of what are these things, being self-aware enough to understand in our life, like where are we on that spectrum, and is that to our advantage? One of the things I do and this is again with anything, is, and I do a lot, the funny thing about the work I do is it's all like, I don't tell people to do things I haven't tried myself or haven't done myself, or,
Yeah.
but one of the things is just, if we take anything, like let's say exercise, right? And you say, all right, and my mind thinks in numbers, I guess, a lot, but on a 1 to 10, right? And my first question is, what's ideal? On a 1 to 10 spectrum of exercise, right? Do I think 10 is ideal? No, I don't think that is ideal, right? So I would say, and to your point, I think we can overdo anything and become over reliant on anything. So I would say for me, my answer would probably be an 8. And so then what I need to do is ask the second question and say, where am I on that? And if I'm a 7, then I probably need to do a little more exercise. And if I'm 9, then I need to pull back a little bit. But there's two pieces to it. There's one is kind of like, what do I believe is ideal in my life, and what is healthy, and, those things. And then, but the trick to that is that if you're on one end, which we usually are, right? Then, or a lot of people are, I guess, if you're on one end, then you already lean towards that side, right? You lean toward that. So if I think the ideal place is an exercise to be an 8 and I'm a 9, I'm leaning towards a 10. So for me to go back from that doesn't feel comfortable. It feels uncomfortable because that's not where my momentum takes me, right? That's not where my natural state pushes me, right? And so most of what we do when we're doing this is a little bit uncomfortable because we need to be able to push back against, if we notice it's unhealthy or if we notice that it's not serving us, we need to be able to push back against that and do, kind of almost work in the opposite direction, which is not really naturally where we want to go. I hope that made sense.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. The moment you said the moment you said that, it made perfect sense to me. And I wanted to go back to, the alcohol and acceptance. I think as a global society, acceptance of people either admitting that they have an issue or they don't. My question to you is, do you think that it's far more difficult for people to accept them as having a problem with alcohol because of how socially acceptable it is and how we see it all over the billboard signs, and we see, the celebrities partying and celebrating on the television? Would you contribute that to so many people, again, having a problem with admitting that they have an issue when it comes to alcohol?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's both. I also think it's changed a lot, right, in the last 20 years. And I think that in the 20 years that I've been conscious of this, I think it's changed a lot. And I think that along with a number of other things, mental health and, just kind of acceptance in general of the fact that there's these things that are causing problems that are real. And that to me, the strength is being able to acknowledge those things, not just, I guess, pretending like they don't exist, and somehow that feels strong, right? And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's very socially acceptable, and it's interesting because you will hear people who they're okay with everybody seeing them hammered, but they don't want people to, they don't want to tell people that they're sober, right? And so it's an interesting thing. You can go and be, do foolish things and make bad decisions and things like that. And there's some embarrassment around that, right? There's some negative feelings around that too. But and this is the part that I think has changed somewhat, is that just the idea of that some people are looking at things and addressing problems. And again, it's not just in this realm. It's around depression and anxiety and ADHD and all sorts of other things, right? That the way that we've typically accepted medical problems, I think the things that are more tied to psychological aspects of it, or those different parts, I think are becoming more accepted and more understood. And I'm hopeful because the youth, as much as older folks like me complain about the younger generations and things like that, they're getting a lot of this right, and their understanding of our brains and what goes on in our head is much greater than it was when I was a child, and the ability to talk about those things and understand those things and acknowledge those things. I think that they're far ahead of what my generation was, and I think that's going to work to their advantage because, like I said, whether you acknowledge it or not, if it's a problem, it's a problem. So you can pretend like it's not. But one thing that I tell people a lot is that many people, most of us, spend a lot of time trying to create narratives. We want the world to see us in a way that we see favorable, and we want people to think certain things about us. And I think the key is learning to. And many of us become really good at it, and especially people in substance abuse and things like that, they become very good at creating this narrative. But the thing I always encourage people to do is what you want, what you want the world to see you as. It's much easier to be that person than it is to try to be something different and convince everybody that you are that person, right? If you want people to think you're honest, be honest, right? If you want people to think you don't have a problem with substances, then don't have a problem with substances, right? And so I think that's the kind of this idea of that if other people think something, that's more important than what the reality is or what the truth is. And I think that's where we get stuck sometimes, that we try so hard to create this image of what we want to look like, but it's way more work. It's much more work, right? It's, running around lying to people all the time and convincing everybody you're honest. That is a really tough thing to do, and people do it, right? But it's a lot of work, and it's really difficult. It's much easier just to be honest, and then you are being honest, and people think you're honest, and it's an easier pathway.
Yeah, that's very true. There's many people running around with masks on, even though they don't have masks on, right?
That's right.
Absolutely, and I think such a big contributor to that is that a lot of these people, and of course we know this isn't true for everyone, is that they haven't done any type of self-exploring to get to, back to who they are, so that they can feel more secure in just saying, no, I don't want to drink, or no, I don't want to smoke, or whatever. But like you had said, that, people were fine, others, random people that they don't know, that they're so fearful of their opinions, they didn't mind seeing them drunk and blacked out and doing X, Y, and Z and dancing on the tables and falling down. But to share that you're sober and I don't want to drink is far more difficult for them. So they either then stay away from that type of, experience any longer, or they're there and they wind up giving in, and
That's right.
I think, and again, I know it's not true for everyone, but at a deeper level, if we're just touching ourselves and tending to the inner wounds, right, then we can step up and show up and put on no mask and no makeup, and we get to just be us, and we feel confident and secure in that and safe within that as well, But yeah, you've said so many good things, and I love your perspective on everything, because your perspective has been consistent and true for essentially everything. That it's not a one size fits all. That it's not and or, it's both, and it can be both, and that's okay, And I think people in society, we always think that it has to be A or B. It can't possibly be both. So you continue to say that. So I really appreciate that with your perspective. Whew, we've gone. Okay, it's been 33 minutes. We're feeling good. We got a little bit more to go. So
Big subjects, right?
You're
talking about really big things and important. I wanted to touch on one thing you just said right there, because I think that one of the things that as people we have a big problem with is when there's a conflict between how we feel and how we think, right? And so, and again, to use this as an example, we'll talk about substance abuse, right? I feel like I want to have a drink, but I've determined that that's not good for me, right? So I cognitively understand that I shouldn't have a drink, but I feel like I want to have a drink. And we really don't like it when those things aren't the same. We don't like it when those things are different. And so generally what we do is we try to change the one we don't like. And if I've made a decision to not drink anymore, then the side that I don't like is the fact that I want to have a drink, right? So I want to feel differently, right? I wish I felt like not having a drink, right? But the challenge of that is that, if you kind of simplify things and break it up into thoughts, kind of cognitively, what you understand, actions, the way we actually do things, and how we feel, right? If you kind of really simplify it and break it down into those three categories, the one we have the least amount of control over is how we feel, right? I can be walking down the street and I can feel scared. Does it mean there's anything to be scared of? No. Does that mean I need to run up and punch the guy who's walking towards me because I'm afraid, he's going to rob me or something? No, I don't need to do that, but I can still feel scared. And me not wanting to feel scared is not enough to change that feeling. And so I think that same concept goes around that, where it's okay that I can feel one thing and think another, that it's okay to accept that and realize that I will have some inner conflict and I will have some of that inside. And then but I just need to be able to understand that, acknowledge it. And then the important part is, what's my action after that, right? Like, so I can feel like drinking and not pick up a drink. I can feel like drinking, know cognitively that I shouldn't drink, and then end up not picking up a drink. It's fine, right? Okay, I felt like drinking. It's not a big deal. Now, if I follow my feeling in that and then I drink, and that's something that's really damaging to me, and then I go down a path that is really in the wrong direction. And so I think just accepting that these can be different and realizing that we're probably not going to, I think we can affect the way we feel through thoughts and actions, right? I think we can do things. If I wake up this morning and I feel really out of shape, and I don't like the way that feels, then I can think about it and I can put together a plan of getting more fit and how I'm going to eat and all those things. And then 2 weeks later, I'm going to wake up and I'm not going to have that same feeling. I'll feel more fit than I did 2 weeks ago. So you can affect the way you feel, but I can't just change it in the moment. If we could, we all like to feel happy. You just have 100% of the people walking around being happy all the time, because every time I felt anything other than happy, I would just change the way I feel and be happy, right? So anyway, I wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And when it comes to you and your, last 20 years in regards to what you were just talking about not picking up or not having the desire to pick up any longer, that is a drink. How many years into recovery did that feeling of wanting to pick up another drink subside and it just wasn't present for you any longer?
Yeah, I think I look at it like a pie chart, right? Like the percentage of time that I either thought about it, wanted to do it, somehow that still had it on my mind. And I think that over time, what I think is that part is decreasing. So on day one, it was, 90% of the time or 95% of the time. And on year one of not doing it, it was 20% of the time or 10% of the time. And so I think it just kind of is something that is decreasing over time, where it's really just something in your scope of thought and feeling and all those types of things, just how relevant it is in your life. And that becomes the less that it is relevant, the less that it becomes relevant in your brain. And so I don't know that there's a set time for that, but I do know that we can affect that, meaning that the more work we put in, the more we're trying to do these things that encourage that, is going to speed up that timeline and will get you there quicker, right? It's never going to be quick enough, right? It's never going to be. We're I can speak for myself. I'm not the most patient person, or at least historically haven't been, but it's not going to be quick enough. But I think that that's really what is understanding that we're trending in the right direction. It went from 90 to 80 to 70 to 60. And so I'm doing something right. And as long as that's trending in the right direction, I'm going to get to where I want to be. As long as it continues to go down, I'm going to get there. And I think that holds true for anything in life, right? If we're trending in the right direction, we are eventually going to get to where we want to be. There's ways to make that slope higher or whatever, greater or less than. But I think at the end of the day, that's really the important piece is. And you hear people talk about right, progress, not perfection, things like that. And at the end of the day, I really think that's the important piece, because as you are trending in the right direction on all of these things, you're feeling better about who you are as a person and the way you're living your life. And then it gets easier. I wish I could, give people that feeling early on, right? Because it would make this much easier. But that's one of the main things that you see with all the work that we do, is just it's the erosion of self-worth and self-esteem and how they look at themselves. And what it does is it makes you not want to reflect. It makes you not want to be self-aware, because you don't like what you're seeing. And so I stay away from that, right? And so I learned to not be aware or to not reflect, because I don't like it. I don't like the way it feels. I don't like the way it looks. And so I learned how to not do that. And it's such an important piece of us progressing and developing into the people we want to be. Then many times you have to relearn that. You have to learn how to reflect. You have to learn how to, because it's something that we've over time kind of taken out of our system.
Yeah, that's powerful share there. And to what you were saying about wanting it quick, I think that's, a part of this society is that, due to what we have here and our phones, we want everything so instant. Like, we've got all the information we could possibly need right here at our fingertips. And I think in regards to recovery and healing, people think it's the same when it comes to change, right? And they want to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And in my opinion, there is no light at the end of the tunnel. The light is in the work. And it's understanding that it is not going to be a straight line. Though we want it to be a straight line, sometimes we're going to go up a hill and we're going to go down. And sometimes I know for myself that in regards to my recovery, my healing, is that there were steps back.
Yeah.
There were setbacks. But that too is a part of the journey, and accepting that, in the moment you accept it, you can now use it for your comeback, or, one step back, two step forwards, and understanding that that's a part of it, but it's a choice to stay there or not,
That's right.
And so, yeah, I think there's so much more we can talk about. When you reflect, because I think we'll just keep it here. I think I'm going to want you to come back on, because I want to be able to dive into the things that you're doing now. And I know that's not going to be a short conversation. when it comes to yourself, when you reflect on, again, why you started, was there a significant event that opened you up to realizing, oh shoot, something's wrong. Something's very wrong here, and I need to start inflicting some change in my life now? Or was it not that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in looking back, right, you can see many things. It's really difficult to see it in real time, and and then also learn where to attribute that, right? If you have a relationship that's not going well, what is that because of your substance use, or is it because it's a bad match? Or and again, I think that we kind of naturally don't like to own our own stuff, right? And that's particularly true when we're not in a very healthy place. And so I think that in looking back, there's lots of things, right? But if I look at it like in the real time, that is part of the challenge of this, is that being able to properly assess these things in real time when you're also putting something mind altering into your body, which is doing the exact opposite of what needs to happen, which is to have clarity and to be able to understand that, then it makes that much more challenging. So we're kind of changing our thought process and things like that through things that we're doing or putting in our body or whatever. And then at the same time, we're learning to not want to own things and not want to reflect on things and not want to be self-aware. And so that's the real challenge, right? The challenge is getting to the place where you can acknowledge something and say, yeah, this is causing problems in my life. And to your point earlier about exercise, I mean, this is not unique to things that we look at as good or bad, right? I mean, most of us have been encouraged in our lives to work really hard. It's possible to work too much, right? It's possible to love too much. It's possible, and then they call that other words like, being codependent and like there's all of these things. And I just think that in college, I was an econ major, and, kind of there's this concept of diminishing returns, right? At some point, something can be very good, but there's a tipping point when it starts to work against you. And I think that if we can learn as people how to properly assess that, acknowledge it, reflect on it, and then be willing to address it and make the changes both through our thoughts and our actions, then we can work towards the life that we want.
Yeah. And I think to add on to that too, you brought up the exercise again. And I think, outside of exercise, whether it's that or just any area of life, I think people are constantly keeping themselves busy. And I think we've lost sight of the fact that we are human beings, not human doings. We have to have time to just be without distraction. But that in itself can be very uncomfortable for people, So I love that you said that. And again, you're a powerful human, brother. And everything that you're saying, I would imagine people walking into your doors now have a level of safety and comfort, and knowing that you don't take, again, just a one size fits all approach, that you can see it from different lenses now because of the work that you've done on yourself. So I want to applaud you. Kudos to you and praise you for the incredible work that you've done. And like I said, I would certainly love to have you come back on and dive more into, because you had brought up that you've got a sector within your company about, working with athletes. So I would imagine you've had conversations with NCAA schools, and I know I have myself. So I want to dive into that because I have some beliefs around, the NCAA, and so, but we can get into that next time. Any last piece of advice or anything else that you would like to share for any of the listeners?
I mean, I guess I would just say, I think that, kind of what the work that you're doing and the conversations that you're having, I think these are all really important, right? And the more people we have, the more awareness we have, and the more people we have talking about these things. This isn't, this is not a small section of society that could get some positive usefulness out of understanding this a little bit better. And so, the ability to do a podcast or to write an article or we all, and work with somebody individually, right? Like all of those things are helpful. And I think it's just, these are impactful pieces. And so, I applaud you for your message and kind of your drive to get people to information and to understand this better and to get some clarity on it. It's extremely complicated, confusing, and pushes against a lot of the things that we've learned in life. And to your point about this is one of the things of why we began working with athletes, is because if you as an athlete my entire life, I know the lessons I learned and the approaches that I was taught to take, and most of those have served me really well and have helped me in the rest of my life, learning how to work through hard things, learning how to fail, learning how to deal, work with teammates, all those things, very positive. And even the one lesson of just push through it, just work harder, that has served me. And at the same time, we have to be able to recognize when that's not the solution, and that just trying harder does not solve everything. Sometimes we need to have a better understanding of it. Sometimes we need to be willing to ask for help. And it's really hard for people to do that. Athletes are probably even more ingrained to not do that, right? And to just work harder, try harder, run faster. And so that's like a lot of the work we do with the athletes. And I think it's just indicative of society in general that the messaging, throughout history has gotten better in that regard, and it was slower to hit, athletes, and it's not just athletes, right? But kind of that mindset, and so it's important that we can help all those people have a better understanding, whether they're athletes or business gurus or it doesn't matter, right? But that like I said, I think there's this. It's not bad or good, right? It's bad and good. So
I like that, because it's, again, I think that's a part of like the grind culture. You just got to keep going and keep going. Well, while you're keeping going, your mind is overactive, and through that approach, you can't necessarily see what's there for you to see, and therefore to learn to understand that I don't have to run through this wall. I can simply step to the side and just walk around it, Right. And so right. I love that you brought that up there. And, if anybody, wanted to reach out, is there anywhere that they could find you, whether that's email or, I know we're friends on LinkedIn, so obviously you've got that, but are there any other platforms that you use, or are you kind of just staying tight knit and just staying to your people there in Chicago?
Not at all. I'm happy to have people contact me. You can find me LinkedIn. My last name is Bylsma. The name of our center is Millennium Counseling Center. Our website is millenniumhope.com. My email address is Derek, Derek, @millenniumhope.com. Generally pretty accessible. I will always get back to people. And, if there's anybody who hears this that thinks somehow I can be helpful in any way, I'm always more than happy. I appreciate that people reach out and ask for some assistance in things, and I'm always going to try to have that be a positive experience for them, so that they're encouraged to continue to do that, because I think it's really important. So yes, people are welcome to contact me, and I will certainly do whatever I can to be helpful, whether it's something I can do or finding the right resources for them. We do have access to a lot of that stuff, and kind of know where people can get help if they want it, or assistance, or whatever that is. So yeah, just the one quick thing I'll say is Millennium has 2 L's and 2 N's. So it's MILLENNIUM. It's often misspelled.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for your time. And one last thing on my end, this whole time, reflected back on when we first met, I've been pronouncing your last name wrong, Bylsma, because in the hockey world that I'm kind of in, it's Bylsma. So when you pronounced it Bylsma, I was like, he's clearly not a hockey guy. He must be a soccer guy.
Well, it's my Dutch ancestors when they came over and they changed it. So yeah, in the Netherlands, it is Bylsma, and actually it was originally even spelled differently, but it's and I often get asked about hockey because, well, being from Michigan, it's a big hockey state, and then also there's some famous Bylsmas. I say Bylsma, but the in the hockey world. So absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you once again to Derek Bylsma for joining us here today. As I mentioned a few different times, certainly looking forward to having you come back on. For all the listeners, thank you again for showing up for another episode of the Raw, Authentic, and Vulnerable podcast. As always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. That's going to be it for now. Stay well, stay blessed, stay grateful, and we'll see you guys next time.
This is a sportsy media production, part of Quiet Loud Studios, the podcast network where reflection meets amplification.